Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Jennifer Kerhin talk about that difficult transition most growing businesses endure when the owner can no longer handle all of the most important tasks herself, but also can't quite afford to hire the people she needs to lighten her load. It's part of the reason Jennifer, as she's told us in previous episodes, has been working 12-hour days 6 days a week. It's a challenging transition, and it has a name. It's the Valley of Death, says Shawn, who compares it to crossing a desert. We also discuss how big the owners want their businesses to get, why important tools and processes seem to break with every $500,000 of revenue growth, and what constitutes the proper care and feeding of salespeople. Plus, Jay has an idea for owners who are having a hard time selling their businesses. The idea involves selling the business to a key employee in a transaction Jay is calling a WE-SOP. Get it? It's kind of like an ESOP, but it's a lease-to-own version of an ESOP. A WE-SOP. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, who's CEO of the Goltz Group, and whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Jennifer Kerhin, who's CEO of SB Expos and Events, an events management business based near Baltimore, Maryland. The episode is titled, You're in the Valley of Death. Welcome, Shawn, Jay, and Jennifer. It's great to have you all here. I want to start today by picking up on a conversation we had at our event in Chicago. The first thing we did in our peer group conversation there was to kind of take turns suggesting conversation topics, and then we voted on the ones we found most intriguing. And the topic that got the most votes and that we spent the most time discussing was one I think you suggested, Jennifer, which was, how big do you want to be? Am I right? Was that your suggestion?
It was. And there's, that age-old discussion with business owners, if you look at top line or bottom line, right? And so when you think about how big, are you thinking how big your annual revenues should be? Or how much money do you want to take home? And how big is enough?
What prompted you to ask the question? Was there something, a decision you had to make that was looming that prompted that? Or why were you thinking about it?
Our company's in a fast growth from a revenue standpoint right now. And so I'm spending a lot of time on shoring up operations. Our theme for the year is scalable structure. And so I'm not putting a lot of review on the bottom line on our profits. Not that they're bad, but I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on how to create structure, which takes a little more investment. And then I started to think, well, how much do I invest at this stage? Because am I investing to create a $10 million company, a $20 million company, or should I look at it in stages? Should I say, okay, I need to invest enough to get to 5 million, and then I'm probably having to do another investment to get to 10 million. And someone at that table said something so interesting that I play over and over. And they said, every $500,000 in revenue, something breaks in your company operationally wise that you're going to have to fix. And I can't tell you how many times I think about that. So overall is, where do I put my priorities for the future? And it depends on how big I want to be.
See, I never in all of these, well, not never, now I do, but in the old days, I never thought about how I just kept working to grow it, and I didn't think there was enough. And now I absolutely believe, at least for me, there is such a thing as enough, which means I don't need to work any harder. It's doing just fine. Everything's good. And I do think it's a good conversation to have because there's an economy of, one of your issues is you would like to not have to work as hard. So I would say there is a size of a business that you get to that you can now afford to pay the operations person, the accounting person, and the marketing person, and you don't have to do the work. And you can't do that at a $2-3 million company usually because you can't pay them enough. So I do think there's a sweet spot, for lack of another word. And in your case, I don't know, maybe it's $8 million, because then you could afford to pay people to do all those things and you'd be making a lot of money. What's a lot of money? 10% bottom line. I mean, that's a lot of money, I think, but I do think it's worthy thinking about, especially at your stage.
Shawn, you have the advantage of having had your own experiences, but also seeing inside a lot of the businesses that are your clients. I'm curious, do you have a sense of what's more common? Do most business owners kind of just see what happens and grow however much they grow, or do they think about setting a goal and trying to hit it?
I think I've seen both, maybe in equal measure. Although I will say I'm most skeptical when somebody comes to me and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I want to become a $50 million business." Like, if that's the mission, I find it's often hard to find motivation around that. And that's a different thing than what Jay described, which is I want to grow the business. So I usually see the three camps being, I pick a number, it's a random number, it's often a number that people pick because there's some sort of ego attached to it.
It's a big round number. Sometimes it's 100 million.
Yeah. All right. It's 100 million or a billion. And I usually am not very inspired by that. The second group is probably the J group, which is like, I want to grow because the thing I'm doing, I'm excited about. I believe in it. I know it creates opportunities. And then the third group is just focused on, they're just really interested in the work and maybe aren't that fixated on future state. So it's really all over the map, Lauren.
I knew a guy, he wanted to hit $100 million and he went bust. I mean, what's this whole thing with hitting 50 million? It's like, the fact of the matter is most people do not have the wherewithal, the money, the smarts, whatever it is. That's very difficult to build to a $50 million company. That's like anyone playing track at the high school going, I want to be in the Olympics. Yeah, maybe, but that's a long shot. But getting to 10 million? Okay. Is that success?
I mean, the statistics are, it's like 4% can get to $1 million and like 0.04% can get to 5 million. So 10 is actually very, very difficult.
Okay. And in my case, I was told that less than 1% of companies have more than 100 employees. So I'm already in the less than 1% thing. But the point is, the good news is, I think you could, now obviously it depends what business you're in, but I think if you had a business that was doing, I don't know, $6, $7, $8 million, you can make a lot of money and have an extremely competent staff that you pay well, so that you can do like me and golf 4 days a week and go for a massage on the fifth day.
One issue is, yes, to figure out where you want to be personally. But the second part is, where do you invest in your structure to support today, but also tomorrow, right? And so understanding how much money do you really want to invest? Do I want to invest in right now? To Jay's point, my issue is I need to get some balance back, right? To take off some of it. How much do I invest in my accounting? Do I hire a controller and a bookkeeper internally? That takes off a lot of effort on me, but that's a hefty salaries, right? To do. That's sort of the question I'm going with, is investment.
The hefty salary is you doing your own accounting. That's a hefty salary. You're doing the work of somebody that should be making a fraction of what you're making. That's a hefty salary. So that one's an easy one.
So Jennifer, you're a professional services business?
Yeah, we're convention management and trade show sales.
Okay, so people, it's people powered.
Yes.
And so you're at the $3 million mark, somewhere in that range?
Yes.
And I think you said in the last show I was listening to, around 30 people?
Yes.
You're in the valley of death.
Oh, I've heard that before, Shawn.
What does that mean, Shawn?
So she's big enough to where like systems matter and she needs talented people and she needs to offload the work like Jay is talking about, but not yet quite big enough. And the next number is probably 4 or 5 million for her, where it like starts to stabilize again. Valley of Death's really hard. Yeah.
And you know what? I have to tell you, that was my life for 5, 10 years. That, when you're smaller, you can do everything yourself. No problem. I don't care what, you do it all yourself. Then you start to get really busy, and then you get to be where you're starting to get a little overwhelmed, but you can't go and buy a tenth of an employee. So now you're overwhelmed for a while, and there's that period, which I guess you're calling whatever you just called it, is going from I can't afford somebody, but I'm overwhelmed until you finally can get it over the hump of, okay, now it makes sense. Yeah. And I absolutely lived through that, and it's difficult.
My mentor said the same thing. She said the 2 to 5 million for us.
It's brutal.
Is valley of death. She said, once you get to 5 million, she said, even maybe 4.5 million for me. Once I get that, life's going to change a lot. But that means I have to put the systems and structure in place now.
Can we change the word from valley of death? That's not real inspiring.
No,
I don't
that's
think
great.
you're going to die. I think it's a matter of, it's the valley of being overworked. Yes, but I don't know that it's the valley of death.
Here's why it's, I think, an apt metaphor is like, it kind of goes back to the like pioneer days. If you're going to cross a desert, you got to have a lot of resources, a lot of water, a lot of food, because by the time you get to the other side of that desert, you're about out. And it's like, if you get halfway and you turn around, that's pretty deadly too. It's that between zone where you have to have a lot of resources. You got to really bulk up. And I think to Jennifer's point, like you've got to reinvent all your systems, which costs money. I bet your margins are shrinking like crazy with all this growth.
Yes.
Like you're probably in the single digit realm at this point, and maybe you were in double digits before all the growth. Is that true? I mean, is that kind of...
I'm not quite in single digits yet.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a downward number. And I'm prepared for it because investing in systems and structure to be a $5 million company and to give myself not working 6 days a week. I like your desert metaphor.
I've got more bad news for you. Like, I think your margins are artificial because you are doing the work of 2 or 3 people. And so those salaries are not in your P&L.
Good point.
Yeah.
And so your margins are you need more professional people at this point. So that's the hard part. You've got to make those hires.
You're the woman in the salon who's cutting hair of 30, 40 people a week, and you're right. You're a profession to some degree, like he's saying, but there are some tools here that no one usually don't hear about. One of the tools is perhaps you just raise your prices 5% and put some more margin in there, because if you're growing that fast and you got the demand, I believe that is one of the number one mistakes entrepreneurs make is they don't charge enough. And that's always been my number one problem. So that would take the pressure off. All of a sudden you can go to hire somebody now because you're going to take in another $150,000 and it works.
Do you think you could do that, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think so. I think as we get new clients, it's hard with legacy clients, right?
Yeah.
But with new clients, absolutely.
That's great. You have that. I love what Jay said because I see that over and over, and I made that mistake for many years too, way undercharging. How long have you been at this, Jennifer?
I got my first employee in 2014, but I started, basement in a cell phone in 2009.
But it sounds like this growth has been relatively recent. Is that true?
Yeah, the last 18 months, 2 years.
I mean, to grow that fast in such a short period, you should pat yourself on the back. I mean, we're talking Valley of Death and you're not hiring enough people. Like, you're kicking ass. I mean, you're doing some great stuff.
All right, I'm going to call it the Valley of Opportunity.
Okay.
She's going to make some adjustments, and life's going to get much easier, and she's going to have better margins. And this is just a time to reboot. But the beauty is there is a number out there that you could make more money than you could. I'm not talking about you need to buy a $5 million house in Aspen, but like reasonably, you can make a lot of money, not be working that hard, and have a manageable amount of people and grief. And I think you can do that at, I don't know, $6, $7, $8 million. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Jennifer, have you answered your question? Do you know how big you want to be?
I think I'm not going to measure it by numbers. I'm going to measure it by time for me is working less. I think what Shawn just said opened my eyes, a little aha epiphany, is that my margins are less than if I count the time that really should be other people. That was a little aha moment.
Yeah.
So I think big, small, what I want to get to is where I am taking a few calls a week like Jay. I like that. And to do that, I have to put people and systems in place and have a healthy profit margin. So less how big and more of what the structure I need.
I think if you were doing 6 million and you just did what I call a model income statement, said, okay, well, how many people would that be? And I got to think that would work. Now, here's the rub of being an entrepreneur that a lot of people don't think about. if you're a lawyer or a doctor or anyone who makes a lot of money and you make 700 grand a year, you get a paycheck and you go to your advisor and you put it in the stock, whatever, or you go and buy an expensive, whatever, you spend the money. If you're a business owner and you make 600-700 grand a year, the question is, how much of that do you have to leave in the business? And it might be half. And then the money you leave in the business, you still got to pay income tax on that. And that is why I've never had a lot of cash, because between the taxes and the reinvestment, it just keeps going back in and back in. And it's okay because, the value of the business is still there. But you have to factor in when you say, how much money do I want to make? There's a difference between how much money you made, quote unquote, and how much money you took out. There's definitely a difference in that because you're going to have to keep investing in it.
But so Jennifer doesn't have inventory, but she does have cash flow, like receivables potentially. Do you get paid up front, Jennifer, or do you get paid after you do the work?
I get paid on a monthly basis. So this is the part. One, I love what I do. I love the associations I work with. I love the association world.
Yeah.
And the way we get paid is a scope of services divided by 12
Perfect.
for each month. So
Great.
I have pretty great cash flow.
Nice.
All right, here's my concern for you, which is only because I've talked to you before, so I know what you're doing. You're trying to do this virtually, and I am very concerned that is going to prove to be very difficult to continue hiring, training, mentoring, monitoring, managing, leading.
I think for what we do, convention planning and the type of travel and how often we travel, I am not as concerned about that. I think the training part, especially for recent college graduates, is something I'm going to have to look at because when you go fully remote, you need an excellent training program. And we're not quite there. We have a good one, but it's not excellent yet. But I'm not worried in the long term. I can work on that.
Well, Jennifer did also tell us last time that she's been able to hire quality people that she might not have been able to hire previously when she was restricted to her particular area.
For sure. It opens up the market to many more people. But I'm just saying there is going to be those 1 out of 10 that don't get their act together. That, Shawn, how many people, when you hire 10 people, how many of them work out?
Before the pandemic, I would say 90%.
Wow, that's excellent.
In the pandemic and hiring remotely, our failure rate went up significantly. It was super depressing. But I think Jennifer's unique in that, if I understand you correctly, Jennifer, your people have to kind of go all over the country. And so you've kind of woven in to your business model the opportunity to get together. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're on show site at least once a month, sometimes 3 times a month for these conventions. So we're having dinner, meeting them, deciding when you're on show site, who's great at problem solving, who's better at pre-planning, and writing that into our systems. Yeah. So it's a little bit different because we see each other often throughout the year.
Jennifer, can we go back to what you said before about the notion that every $500,000 in growth, something breaks? Can you talk about how that's applied to you?
Sure. So I started thinking about that coming back from the conference in Chicago. And I thought, okay, so the first $500,000 of revenue, great. But then what I realized is we were doing sales using Excel spreadsheets, and that wasn't working. So then I invested in Salesforce. And then the next $500,000, I realized that we didn't have a good project management system. So as we hired our first staff, we had no way to manage tasks. Then we're now on sort of round 2, but we hired an initial project management software. Then not even another $500,000, but probably $300,000 later, I had used QuickBooks, which was great, but I had to need to upgrade my systems of how I did it, how my chart of accounts was. So I'm starting to think back and I'm like, wow. And it's just a product of growth. It's maybe not so much it breaks. It's that what worked for you at that level is not the system that you can take to the next level.
Well, it's called growing pains. You're going through growing pains. But here's the one that you might not have had yet that's going to be the big one that's going to be very troublesome. The person you hired when you had 4 people is maybe going to grow along with you, or maybe they're going to get peaked out and you're either going to have to bring someone in to manage them, which is not going to make them happy, or you're just going to get over their head. And I don't think Shawn, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a business around that doesn't outgrow people, and it's painful. You with me on that, Shawn?
Definitely seen it many times. What's kind of the average age of your employee, Jennifer?
I would say 35 to 45.
Oh, interesting. Okay. There's some kind of magic trick in your P&L because your ratio of revenue to people is like what, maybe 3 million to 30 people. That's what, 100,000 per employee.
Well, she has no cost of goods sold.
Are there no, but it doesn't work from a certain, are there part-time people in there or?
There are. I was about to say full-time equivalents, we're looking at 24.
Okay. All right. Thank you. When I first heard that, I'm like, she's not making any money like at full time, but that makes sense.
Yeah. And we're doing about 3.4 this year. So you had a little bit more revenue, a little less people.
Yeah.
Is it amazing, Shawn? No, but it's good.
Yeah. That's 142,000 per person. Yeah. That's a ratio I've tracked for many years. I think Paul Downs has talked about this. And in the service business, you probably need to be a little higher, which means what that tells me is you're doing too many jobs and maybe not paying yourself a market-based wage.
I think, too, my problem is scope, is fine-tuning scope a little bit better to ensure that we're getting paid adequately for the scope of work we're doing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, Jennifer, are you going to start raising your prices?
It's minimizing scope, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's less about prices. It's more of, I think our prices are per hour are okay. It's the, hey, I thought this would take 10 hours and it took 50. That's where I have to focus more energy.
Well, that's one problem. The other one I'm going to guess is you're going to figure out, if you haven't already, that some customers you just can't make money on. Period. End of the story. That they just require more attention, more time, more than they're willing to pay. And it's part of life. Sometimes you just have to lose some bit. I don't do it a lot. I almost never do it. But there have certainly been cases where we've just realized this just isn't worth all the trouble. Do you got any of those?
I used to. I don't think anymore.
Okay.
I think I got a lot better at that, Jay, of realizing from a time standpoint, our scope issues isn't really client-based. Our clients now are wonderful. Our issue is more the technology needed. Is we thought it would only take 10 hours, and what we're realizing is this was way more complicated from a technical standpoint, and we need 50 hours. And that's me not understanding in this post-COVID world of doing virtual and hybrid events.
Oh, right. It's more complicated. Yeah.
It's way more complicated.
Right.
This is something that nobody knows how to do, right? It got created 2 years ago. We're all still learning. That's the problem I'm seeing. Our clients are fantastic. It's the technology is brand new.
See, that's actually an opportunity because you're smart and you're going to figure it out better than other people do. And that's why you've been able to grow the business, because you're better at figuring this stuff out. People that have been doing the same thing for the last 30 years might not be as apt to be able to navigate it. Maybe they're just going to retire.
Well, to that point, Jay, we figured it out. We haven't figured out from a scope and price, but we figured out the tech work now, right? The technology. But in order to then do a better job of either a business model in terms of charging by hour, charging by scope, one of the things I realized, and you pointed this out recently, is that we need a much stronger brand presence. And we need to explain our story much better. We're not your parents' meeting planners or your old school trade show sales. We are a hybrid convention planning and trade show sales company. And my brand, my marketing does not reflect that, which I need to fix, which is another investment. Right now, I'm investing heavily into a new website, into exhibiting this year. That hopefully will be paying off in 2024, but it's significant investment now because what happened the past 2 years, it wasn't reflected.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that will make a huge difference because you are, in fact, bringing something to the market. Some of the stuff that you're bringing to the market didn't even exist. You bring it to the market because Zoom calls didn't exist 10 years ago. So you're repackaging and inventing a whole new selling proposition, as they say.
All right, next topic. Shawn, you've talked more than once here about how COVID threw your marketing off. In particular, you used to rely on events to bring in prospects, and obviously that got interrupted. You recently hired a salesperson. What prompted that, and how's it going?
Yeah. So I had been cultivating a business development person internally for many years, somebody who had gone from an operations role actually, they'd gone from more of a customer-facing role to an internal operations role. And then I was developing her as in the business development and taking over a lot of the things I had done. That was going splendidly up until 2020. And the pandemic just really messed that whole thing up because the pandemic just really made her job very, very difficult. And for a number of reasons, but I think a big one being that she was not able to be successful in her job in the pandemic. She ultimately left the company. And, as a 10-year run at Kinesis, so I owe her a big debt of gratitude, and she was a great employee. But I needed to find a way to replace that role because I have a whole transition plan that I'm working on. And a big, hard part of that transition plan is getting out of the business development job.
So what is she doing today out of curiosity? I'm just curious to see what she went into that worked.
She went to work for a very large digital agency, 300 employees, so very different than Kinesis. And, got the big title and the whole thing.
Wait, that's what I want to know. What's her title now?
I think it's Chief Brand Officer. I think it's something like that. Yeah.
Okay, because this is what I've just heard, which I find interesting. Lauren starts it out by going, "Hey, you hired a you wanted to bring in a salesperson," and then you said a business development person, which is not necessarily the same thing.
True.
And now she's got a job as the Chief Brand Officer, which isn't like either of the other two. So there's really that's what's interesting about hiring someone to do this role. Do you need a salesperson, which is very different than somebody who there's an overlap there, but this is where it gets tricky. And I've learned the hard way. I'm a retailer and was used to hiring inside salespeople. And when I went to hire outside salespeople, I never understood the difference because I've never been in that world. And I hired lovely, wonderful people you'd love to have lunch with. The only problem was they couldn't find any business.
Jay, just to make sure everybody understands it, inside salesperson meaning somebody who works in a store and deals with customers who come in.
They work in the store, customers walk in, they take care of them, they're lovely, they're nice, they do a great job versus selling artwork to corporations. Someone needs to go out there, identify the companies, knock on doors, make phone calls, make presentations. It's very, very, very different.
And that's the shift that Shawn just made, right? Shawn, you're going to somebody who's knocking on doors now, correct?
Well, so yeah, and Jay highlights a common pitfall is that the ability to convert a warm prospect versus to generate new business is a very different skill. So I would say that with my former employee, she started out more, and I did this intentionally. Inside sales is an easier, I'm going to insult some people, but it's an easier job.
There's no question it's an easier job. I don't think it insults anyone.
And so, I started her off. I would go get the thing, kind of work with her to give her pieces of the sales process. And then over time, she would take on more and more and more. And then before the pandemic, she was actually doing outside sales. And she was actually pretty good at it. But then the problem is the pandemic took away her ability to meet people face to face and in person, which was how she did that work. So the new hire is exclusively outside sales.
Shawn, how do you get most of your leads?
So like Lauren was saying, before the pandemic, we would do a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of workshops, a lot of kind of thought leadership out in the physical world. And then we would build relationships with centers of influence and get referrers. So combination of word of mouth referrer and then thought leadership.
Thought leadership.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was enough to grow the business about very predictably 10% a year.
So this new salesperson, let's pretend this is Glenn Ross, the famous sales movie. Are you handing them the leads? Where's my leads? Are you handing them a shoebox of leads when they come in the morning? Or are you saying, yeah, go out and figure it out? That's what I want to know.
Probably in between those two extremes. So what we're doing is we're teaching him the fundamentals. What's an ideal fit customer? What's a right fit? What's a wrong fit? What are the signs and indicators? What is our value proposition? What are the services we offer? So we're spending a lot of energy to train him and get him up to speed. He's a very senior person. He's got an MBA. He worked at the Business Journal for many years. He's managed and coached sales teams. He's done sales. He's really good. And I've known him for a long time. So I'm able to not have to do a lot of hand holding with Rob, which is great. And he's very thoughtful and smart.
But Shawn, is he the thought leader or are you?
No. I am still in that role, but that's changing because I've also promoted some folks internally who are now developing themselves as thought leaders.
Okay, so they're starting a coup. They're planning the coup, basically. All right, good.
A coup that I started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would take the leads that develop from other people's thought leadership.
At this point, no. At this point, I'm going to take him. What I want him to do is his sole job is to identify prospective customers and to actually do outreach and connect to them. That's a totally different approach than what we've used over the last few years.
So how does he intend to do that?
It's a combination, so there's market intelligence. So using tools like LinkedIn, using our CRM, going through our newsletter signups, basically we do targeted strategic sales outreach. We're not doing spray and pray. We're not, cold emailing thousands of people.
Like former prospects, former customers?
Yep. Former prospects, former customers. We're looking for referrers, connections, having meetings with them.
Shawn, have you had any previous experience hiring a salesperson? Have you ever tried this before?
Many years ago, maybe 13, 14 years ago, when I had no idea what I was doing, we hired a salesperson. It was a total failure. Yeah.
Why?
We didn't know what our value proposition is. We didn't know what our unique ability was. We didn't know who our target customer was. We hired a salesperson who had been successful at selling product for which there was a clear market fit. I was hoping he could do consultative sales, which is a totally different business approach. So total failure, and we owe the responsibility for that. The better perspective I have is probably through the eyes of my clients. I have seen so many clients try this, fail at it, some succeed, and learned a lot through their experiences over the years. Yeah.
Jennifer, have you gone down this road?
We hired our first business development person / salesperson. I'm now thinking probably more in the business development person 18 months ago. She is a thought leader herself. She comes from this industry and had years of experience. That's why I was asking you this question, Shawn. Because of the growth, half her time, though, honestly, is spent on supporting me in operations because of her strength. And to be honest, we couldn't take any more business, right? So I don't need her business development side. But I was hoping not just thought leadership is how we grew too, but I started to think to get to the next level, I need to move beyond that. And I'm thinking, what's that next level of marketing, right? Sales, obviously, outreach of sales, Shawn, like your person's going to do, but what's the next part? And that's where I'm going, thinking.
For companies like ours, Jennifer, I'm always interested in things of like, what's the asymmetric outcome? What is the thing I can do that has like not incremental results, but actually a steep slope? And like I have a client, for example, where he actually started his own association, which I'm like, wow, that's really cool. He started an association for a very narrow niche for which there is no association.
Yeah.
But it's like, those are the employees he wants to hire. Those are the clients he wants to get. I'm just like, that's super smart. That's the kind of like asymmetric thing I'm looking for.
Yeah. We can have a whole podcast on creating your own association.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I have a lot of stories about that.
That'd be
that
awesome.
big
Interesting. We may have to come back to that. Going back to your salesperson, I'm curious, how did you structure your arrangement with him? Is it primarily commission or salary or both?
Yeah, there's a small commission. I have seen over the years that if you weigh things too heavily on the commission side, you get really bad unintended consequences. So I would say it's probably 70-30, salary versus commission. Mostly I'm really looking to align incentives. And what I mean by that is you don't want to hire a salesperson that brings you just any client, because then you start to waste your time with either tire kickers or bad fit customers or clients that make it hell on your team.
That's the unintended consequences you're talking about.
Exactly. So primarily salary. The unique thing I've done with this situation is that this person, because I've known him for a long time, he has a situation where he really needs like a part-time work right now. And I don't want to get into details why that is, because that's personal, but it is allowing me to kind of evaluate this without such a major financial commitment that you normally have to make with a salesperson.
You know what? You just answered the question, which I was thinking, should I bring it up because it's a little brutal? But my question was going to be, and I say it to myself, why would someone come to work for you or for me? I mean, back especially 20, 30 years ago, in hindsight, I think they could be selling Herman Miller furniture or something. They could be selling carpeting. They could be selling so many other things that's easier and got way bigger numbers on than selling artwork. And so I recognize in hindsight, I'm not going to get the best and brightest salespeople that are out there in that world unless there's a reason. And you just gave us the reason. He wants to work. He wants flexible hours. And that makes perfect sense. And I also would say, if you ask me what the compensation thing, I'm right on the same money with you. I think the 70-30 thing's right in the neighborhood. Because you go too much on the commission side, you're going to get the kind of person that's you're not going to want to work with.
Yeah, totally.
Shawn, do you tier your commission? Is your commission like if you get a new person, obviously the hunter-farmer status, right? But what if that person repeats business? Are you still giving him a commission off of repeat business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and we structured it so that there's a real positive outcome for clients staying with us and continuing the journey.
Okay.
There's a small commission when a client starts. And then, after a year, they actually get paid out incrementally over the year the client is with us. So I'm really trying to align it. Like, we want clients to stay with us for many years. And if he builds this right and he brings clients to stay with us for many years, it's a compounding effect for him where the commission side of it grows over time as clients stay with us. Because ours is a relationship business, and you bring in the wrong people, then I start to have employee turnover, and I can't have that. That is toxic for a business like ours. So you got to bring in the right customers, and you don't want to incentivize a salesperson to bring in just anybody so that they can make their mortgage payment.
Do you want to hire that guy that says in the interview, "Oh, I could sell snow to Eskimos"?
Oh gosh,
yeah,
no.
That's what I say. No, I don't want that person here.
Right.
Shawn, we did the same thing. I tiered it so that there's a higher percentage for the first contract, and renewals, there's still a percentage to keep that, what do they call it, that long tail for the sales personnel, so that person stays and you have the right kind of client that will stay and repeat with you, that everybody's happy with.
Yeah.
And then that salesperson gets a percentage of that.
But at the other side, you also don't want to structure it so that if they work really hard for 2, 3, 4 years and get a good book of business, that they can just coast because the business is coming in. They're not. You want to have the need to go out and find some new customers. So there does need to be some nuance in that.
I'll worry about that when I get to the $5 million. How about that?
I mean, Jay makes a good point in that I see this in the insurance industry a lot, where these insurance agents worked really hard in their early career, and then they have this book of business, and then they're like the laziest people you've ever met because there's just a lot of commission in that world. Sorry, insurance brokers, but yeah.
All right, one more topic. Jay, you've told us here previously that you've tried to help the owner of a frame business sell his business. As I recall, it's a fairly common situation that we're hearing a lot about these days, a baby boomer owner who's ready to move on but hasn't been able to find a buyer. And I gather you came up with kind of an intriguing suggestion for him. Can you tell us about that?
First of all, he's got a very successful, way more successful than most frame businesses. And he owns the building and he wants to sell it. And he hired the business broker. And I just coincidentally ran into him and he told me the story. This was after he'd already listed it and it had been 6 months and he wasn't getting any bites. So he's asking a good amount of money for the business and it's worth it. Okay. So then he's got someone else that's looking at it. The broker found someone who wants to be an absentee owner. And I realized, I think I came up with a new plan for him, which he's excited about, I think. He's got some key employees there, or at least one key employee. And I said, why don't you work out a deal where make them the president of the company, train them better, give them more money, and then in 4 years, sell them the company, and then they'll have some money put away from the money you pay them, and then you can pay it out. Everybody wins.
Wait, is this an employee who has the money to buy the business?
No, that's the point.
No,
that's
he has to finance it.
This is the typical situation in businesses. You've got lovely, wonderful, dedicated employees. that don't have the money to buy the business. Now, I think a mistake would be to say, hey, why don't you buy the business? You can pay me out over 4 years. They got nothing in it. I mean, if anything goes wrong, you got a problem now. You just gave away your business to someone versus work it for 4 years. I'll pay you more money and then I'll sell it to you.
A significant amount more? I mean, you're not talking about like a 10% raise.
Yeah, sure. If they're making here, I'll give you a real number. No, here, I'll give you, not in this case, but if you've got a key employee who's making $60,000 a year, you raise them to $90,000 and you take it out of what you're making. But if you've got a profitable business, that shouldn't be a problem. And then they've got some money to pay you back. Because here's what's interesting to me. The typical small business, that they throw in the word EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation. The typical small business can only sell for maybe, Shawn, you probably know, 3.5, 4 times, maybe?
It depends on the industry,
but not 10. Unless this isn't a computer bill. Okay, so my point is, you're going to sell it. You're going to get paid maybe 3-4 times earnings. Well, if you can hold on to the business for 4 more years, you're going to get that money out of your business. And then by the time you go to sell it to the employee, you could give them a really nice deal. They can pay you for another couple of years. Everybody wins is the point. Whereas if you just try to sell it to someone who's working there and they don't put any money in, I just think that's a mistake. I don't understand why anybody would want to take that exposure.
Jay, you're talking about training an employee to be the president.
Yes.
Okay. So you give them the title and you say, I'll hold your hand, provide training and coaching.
Maybe you go to a community college, you get an accounting class, just one class, just get some background in accounting, which most people don't have. I will train you how to do those pieces of the puzzle that you're not doing that I'm doing now. Yes. Okay.
And how long do you think, if you took someone who wanted to be president, first of all, that's hard to find. Most employers are like, see you later. Wanted to be president with the ultimate goal. It's kind of like lease-to-own, right?
Yes.
Rent-to-own.
Yes.
Is you're the president for a couple years, moving with the expectation you'd move into buying the business. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but here's the beauty of this. First of all, we're not talking about a business with 30 employees. My guess is you probably could find a buyer for that business. The problem is the smaller businesses, it's harder to find. So here's the beauty of this. They do it for 3-4 years. You're still there to back them up. And they change their mind. They don't want any part of it. Okay. You're no worse off than you were before, except you got 4 more years of earnings in your bank. It's a win-win. They change their mind. It's not a problem because you've successfully ran the business for another 3 or 4 years. And I'm telling you, this is compared to most people, they just close. Done. I don't have the statistics, but I can tell you in the frame business for sure, 80-90% of frame businesses just go away. I know because I have a wholesale business. I sell to them. We don't get many people calling up and going, hi, I want to introduce you to the new owner of my frame shop. They usually just go away. It's probably 90-some%. I'm thinking that most small businesses, from what I've seen, just close one day. And I think this could be a solution. Or go bring somebody in with the deal, hire them, bring them into the business, say, here's the deal. Work for me for 3 or 4 years, and I will give you an opportunity to buy the business. What a great opportunity for somebody.
I'm curious, Jay, have you looked into, because to me, I go to kind of the mind of like deferred compensation, because you are taking a little bit of a risk as an owner because you're making all these investments in this person. And if after 5 years they change their mind, now you're at zero again.
No, you missed it. I've got 5 years of earnings in the bank from running the business. I've got my money out.
You're also now 70, and now you do not have a transition plan, and now you're kind of starting over. So
no, you just close the business. Be done.
Well,
you got your money out. No, you got your money out. That's the whole point of this. You got your money out. It's like a maybe installment plan. You either got your money out or you got your money out, and now you can sell to someone else for less money. But that's the whole point of this, that you did get some money out of the business.
Jay, are you thinking that if this works as intended, that the owner's sort of selling the business twice? You get your money out over those 4 years?
To a degree, sure. And no one's getting cheated here.
Yeah.
So this week I was on show site with 3 employees that they're newer. I don't know them very well. And at one dinner, one of them asked me, so Jen, tell us what you do on a daily or weekly basis. And I told them what I do on a week. They all looked horrified. And one of them said, "You could not pay me enough money to do this job."
They have no clue. I would tell people what I was doing. They start laughing like I'm making a joke or something. And like they have no idea that I bought my house in 1984. I had 3 charge cards to the max. I mean, it's not always pretty. I've borrowed against my house 20 times. It's just, this isn't what most normal people do.
Yeah, but the question, Jay, is to your point with the framing guy, is what does that job position description look like for the president, right? Like, is he really telling this employee all the nitty gritty of what the stuff you have to do as a president?
But there might be 3 employees in a business, and they're already doing most of it. And then if the owner goes on vacation for 2 weeks, so what aren't they doing? We know what they're not doing. They're not putting payroll through. They're not doing the accounting. Maybe they're involved with hiring. Maybe they're not. I mean, there's certainly some pieces they're not doing. I'm not talking about taking a guy from the loading dock and going, "Hey, you want to take over the business?" I'm talking about taking a key person that's in your business that's taking care of customers, that's doing most of the work. Now, if you don't have that person, that's another story.
Could you bring somebody in from the outside and do the same deal?
Yes. I have another friend who that's what I'm working with him on, that he doesn't have that key person. And he's got a very successful business. And I said, we need to get you hired someone and tell them on the front end, here's the deal. Come to work here for whatever the number is, and I'll give you an opportunity to buy it. But no obligation.
I'm just trying to understand the model a bit. So you said, give them a raise from 60 to 90. Okay, so that's 30,000. So over 4 years, that's 120,000. But that's pre-tax.
They got 90 grand plus they got some interest. They got 100 grand now.
They
got 100 grand. They give you the 100, and they pay out another 100. Yeah,
and that's enough to buy this.
No,
that's
they
enough
pay
to buy
out
this
over the
business.
next 2 years. But now at least they've got some money in it. Plus, you've been living with them for 3-4 years, and it's working. That's the beauty of this. Nothing's perfect. This is all compared to, you don't have someone standing at the front door giving you a check for $300-400 grand. I mean, it's just, like I said, I've seen all these businesses just close over the years.
They're too small. Nobody wants to buy that business. Yeah, they're too small.
I had a frame place call me. She's in a small town. And I said, "What did you make last year?" She said, $80,000. I said, "Oh, that's not bad." "Oh, that was my gross. And it's my husband and I."
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Do the math on that. Her husband and she are paying themselves $10 an hour to run this business. Look, you're 72. Congratulations. You did something you love for many years and you made a living, and good for you, but it's not sellable.
We got to go in a minute. Jay, one more question. You've talked here a lot about your own thinking about succession and how it's evolved and ESOPs and all that we've been through.
I'm calling this a WE-SOP. This is a WE-SOP I'm talking about.
I like that. Well, that's my question. Is a version of this feasible for you? I mean, obviously you've got kids in the business, but you're not sure they want to take it over. If they don't, could something like this work for you?
Possibly. I mean, I think my kids are in it, and they're in it to win it. And I think they're going to be around, but if I'm around and I'm coming to work every day in 20 years and they say, you know what, yeah, sure. I think this could work for anybody. Not anybody, could work for a lot of people. I just think it's a shame that businesses just close and go away. And the problem is the business owner really didn't have the financial acumen, or they don't listen to 21 Hats. They don't have any perspective to anywhere, and they never thought about some other options. They just do their job. They do a nice job. Comes to retire, they close the store.
All right. My thanks to Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Jennifer Kerhin, and to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, everybody. Wait. Don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.